rectal constipation relief you deserve today at any Walmart near you.
People are still trickling in. We're just going to give it a little bit more time so that everyone can join. All right.
Shit, I don't know how to use the microphone.
All right. Let's say we get started. I think people will still be joining as we go, but at least we can start everything. So good afternoon, everyone. So welcome to DRPT's Commuter Assistance Program Grant Workshop, and thank you all for joining today. My name is Chris Ravia. I am the manager of statewide commuter programs at DRPT, and I will be starting us off today. And then later on, you'll hear from Kathy Moline, who will provide information on our CAP Operating Assistance Grant Program, and then Gabe Ortiz will provide information on the CAP Project Assistance Grant Program. Okay, next slide. All right, so at any time during this presentation, if you have questions, put them in the chat or our Q&A section. And if you don't want to ask your question verbally, just use the little raise your hand feature. And when we call on you, you can unmute and ask your question. But there are places where we will pause during the workshop so we can answer your questions that you have. But you can feel free to put them into the Q&A or chat at any time as we go. And if you know someone that missed this workshop, or you want to go back and review something, we're recording the workshop, and that will be posted to the grant program section of DRPT's website. Next slide. All right, so as you can see from the agenda, we have a lot of information to cover today. I'm not going to read through all that, but might as well let's just get started. Okay, next slide. All right, so first I want to start off with key dates to remember for this whole grant application cycle. Key date number one is December 1st. That's when DRPT will open up our web grant, which is our online application system and grant management system. It opens December 1st. That's the first day you could start working on applications and submit them. But the last day to submit your application is February 1st. And so that's the last day to submit all for the Commuter Assistance Program and transit grants and other special project grants. So that's a key date, February 1st. And then just to give you some information on what we do on DRPT after you submit your application. So we spend February through first part of April reviewing applications, multiple reviews on the applications and scoring them, and then making our recommendations on our funding, which we put into our 6-year improvement program, or SIP. We draft that SIP, and that draft SIP has to go to the Commonwealth Transportation Board during their April meeting. And so that's a big driver of the schedule, is that April CTB meeting date. And once we do that, it is actually a public document, so the public can comment on it. You all can see it too. And during April and May, DRPT, along with VDOT and the Secretary of Transportation, will hold public hearings on the SIP. So the public and anyone else can come to these hearings and see the projects, and also comment and weigh in on projects. And then at the June CTB meeting, that's when they approve the final SIP, and that gets approved. So all those projects in that final SIP are approved at the funding levels that are in the SIP. And then DRPT works feverishly, right around that time, but also early part of July, to get all the grant agreements together for everyone's signature, and that's all done through web grants. And then July 1 is our fiscal year. That's when our fiscal year begins, so that's when funding becomes available. Okay, next. All right, 2 important documents for you that really are helpful documents. First one is is what we call the Blue Book. It's the Transit and Commuter Assistance Grant Application Manual. That has all the information you'll need about grant applications and our grant programs and what they're for and all the details. So we're going to give you some information today on the Commuter Assistance Program, but we're not, this would be about 3 times as long if we told you every detail. So that Blue Book is basically a great guide for you to read and get more of those details. It's going to answer a lot of your questions. And then the other document that we have that's related to the grants is what we call the Purple Book. It's the Grant Administration Procedures Book. And what that is, that's more of okay, now you've got the grant awarded. What do you do next? How do you do the claims? How do you do things in web grants and things that you need to do? That's good to know now, too. And we update both of these documents every year. But the Purple Book is also good to know because it gives you some idea of what's going to be expected from you should you get awarded a grant. Okay, next slide. All right, so just recap of just some of the changes that we did for the Commuter Assistance Program, grant program, and for FY26. And Kathy and Gabe will give you more details on these, but I just want to highlight them because these are certainly things to pay attention to for your grant application. So one of the things we did in the project description of the application, we simplified that to it's just a 1 or 2 sentence answer. And we added a project scope, which that project scope becomes the big description of what are you doing? What is this project going to do, and what are you going to do with the grant funding? And then we're also paying more attention to charges for staff and grant administration charges to the projects. We've seen some changes, or people put some things in the application, and then we get a claim, and it's a little bit different. And then we want to make sure that administration charges are kept low and to a minimum, but we know they're necessary. And Kathy and Gabe will go into more details about what we're talking about there. And then we've seen a lot of applications have, hey, I want to join this organization or that organization, be a member of this and that. So we're going to ask for now some justifications of what you're doing with that membership and how that relates to the project. So we get a better idea of what the purpose of joining that that organization is. And then we have made some changes to the application scoring, which is really important to be aware of as you're putting in the application, because you want your application to score the highest points possible. And of course, and we'll say this multiple times throughout this, if you want to see more details, look in the Blue Book, but then you can also ask your DRPT program manager if you have questions. Okay, next. Right. We did a little update in the current Purple Book to the indirect cost section. There probably will be another update come July 1st when the next iteration of the Purple Book gets released. But just so you know, so some of you charge indirect costs, and what we really need to verify that is we need you to submit your cost allocation plan, an approved cost allocation plan from your agency, with all that information about how you arrived at indirect costs and what goes into all that. And then there's a indirect cost rate that your agency normally charges, to certain costs from your cost allocation plan. You could take the simple way out, right? You can do the 15% rate. That is actually something FTA does, but we at DRPT, we offer that to everyone, not just the people who get FTA funding, just to make it easy. But if you want to have a different rate, you must submit with your application a letter that's approved that rate from a cognizant federal or state agency. And so both of those documents need to be submitted with your application for DRPT's review. And again, the Purple Book has more on the indirect cost information. So you could check that out. Okay, next. And I just want to bring up this funding opportunity for training. And this really is more for the small urban and the rural areas. So a lot of you put some training and things in your application, but I just wanted you to be aware that there's a couple other programs that might apply to you. So one is the Rural Transit Assistance Program, or RTAP. It's FTA funded. It's at 100%, and that's going to fund you going to training and seminars and workshops and even conferences, including travel. There's an application through DRPT, through web grants that you would have to put in for that. That's open year round. So, you can do that. So you might want to check that out if you're in a rural area, particularly if you're in an area that gets FTA Section 5311 funds. If your agency is has a mobility manager working on those transit type of initiatives, this might be something you could use instead of using your CAP grant to do, because our TAP is 100%. And then if you're in a small urban area, you could apply for a small urban training funding, which is the reimbursement there is up to 80% of expenses for that. So check those two out. That's more information about those two training programs are in the Purple Book, but of course you can ask your program manager. Okay, next. All right, we're going to talk about web grants for just a little bit. So next slide. So this is the second year of web grants. Last year, we introduced web grants that took place of the Olga system, which was our prior online grant application and management system. So web grants is it now. So if you've never used web grants, just so you know, you have to have a user account. This is online, so you need an account. And if you do have an account now, you and everyone else who has accounts with through web grants should verify your account information is up to date. Make sure all that's good and everything's good. If there's people in your organization that have user accounts that are no longer with the organization, let us know. We need to take those out. You cannot share login accounts. If every individual person gets one, we want each one of you to use your personal account and not to share it. But everyone needs to have an account that's going to do something in web grants. And Olga used to have a master user where the master user could do a lot of things, for others. Web grants doesn't have that concept. Each individual has to, sign up for an account themselves through the web grants. And one thing, when you're doing your application, so if there's anybody that's going to be later on down the road doing something with that project, whether it's project managers or someone submitting a claim for reimbursement or the eligible person that signs a contract, anybody who's going to be doing those things through web grants, you should in the application make them alternate contacts, and that way they're already in there, because if they're not associated with the application, they won't be associated with the grant award, and then the person will go in to try to submit a claim and go, wait, it won't let me do it because you weren't associated with this particular project. Now, if you missed that on the application, we can always do it later on once we do the awards, but it's good to just do it right up front in the application so we get everybody in there in your organization. And then our Virginia IT agency, they have a policy for across the Commonwealth, all of our systems, and includes web grants that'll log you out after 10 minutes of inactivity. So be aware of that. Make sure you're saving your work, and you don't want to get logged out automatically. All right, next slide. All right, where do you find all this good information? On the DRPD website. So we have a section called our grant programs, and it has, here's just a little screenshot. It has all the grant programs separately, and you see in the middle there, the community assistance program, which we're going to talk about today. But to the left, that is the web grants online grants management system. So if you don't have a bookmark for the web grants login, you should go there and click on that particular box. And next slide. And then you get this. So this is all the information, some information about the web grants system, some background. It also, if you scroll down, obviously it's just a screenshot, but on that web page, if you scroll down, there's training videos and tutorials and things to get you acclimated on how you do things in web grants. So that's very good training for you. And that red arrow is pointing to the link for the login. So that's one place where you can go to access the web grants. Okay, next. And then once you log in, you're going to go to funding opportunities. That's the first step in applying for a grant. So go to funding opportunities, and then you will see in all the posted funding opportunities for all of our DRPT's grant programs, not just for the commuter assistance program. So you'll go to the one that you want, and you'll click on that, and then that will open up into a page where then you'll see a button that says start an application, and you can start an application. And you can always come back to that application. You don't have, you have to complete a lot of things before you can submit it, but you could save it and then log out and come back to it. And you'll see that once you get into, when you come back, when you go to your funding opportunities, you'll see all the applications you started. Okay, next slide. All right, special project grants. Okay, next. So I bring this up because the Commuter Assistance Program, that grant program, is part of our special projects funding. And so this is legislated by the Virginia General Assembly that DRPT can take 2.5% of the Mass Transit Fund and reserve that for special projects. And Commuter Assistance Program is just one of several special projects. So the Commuter Assistance Grant Program, it also includes technical assistance, workforce development, and demonstration programs. So all that 2.5% funding, all those different grant programs are competing for that funding. So as we go through this, you'll hear tips about how to submit a good application. You want to score really high because it is a finite number. And so, every year we have to make some determination about what we can fund based on the budget that we have. And so, the easiest way to do that is, looking at the application that scored really low. And so you don't want to be part of that group. So next slide. All right, and then I'll just give you a little bit more detail about what those other special project grant programs are in addition to the Commuter Assistance Program. So, and then all this again is in the blue book in much more detail. I'm just going to give you a high-level overview. And then yesterday there was another grant workshop for the transit programs that went into more detail on the special projects. That if that's not up there now, it will be posted like this workshop recording will be posted to the DRPT website. Okay, next. So the workforce development. So that's really for development of interns and apprentices that's centered on careers in public transportation. And this is why I brought this up, TDM, transportation management, or commuter assistance. So if your agency does those things, this might be a program where you could get someone that's going to be the next generation of working for you. And that's really what this is about. It's about hiring people that are going to be trained in whatever things that you do in the agency, transportation or TDM related, that hopefully you will hire, but they'll become the next generation of transportation professionals. That grant is what we call an 80-20 split. So that means if awarded, DRPT state funding will pay 80% of the project, and you have a 20% local match. Next. Okay, the other one is technical assistance. That is for anything that, studies, plans, research, data collection, surveying, anything you need to do in the background to get some information and data for your program. That match rate is 50-50, so that requires a 50% local match rate. But things like the Commuter Assistance Program strategic plan, that's what some folks have used to fund that when they're doing that planning. But just so you know, instead of putting those types of things in your CAP application, we really wanted you to get a technical assistance grant if you're going to do those, research and data collection and, surveying and that sort of thing. Okay, next. And finally, the demonstration project assistance, probably not for commuter assistance programs. This is more to test new and innovative transit service. And it's a way to kind of start a service by DRPT providing 80% funding to it with a 20% local match, helps reduce the financial risk of the transit agency. So not really TDM related or commuter assistance related, but it is part of the special project. So we get some really good projects in here, I think some microtransit type of things. And so, just be aware that that's all part of that one pot of funding for special projects. Okay, next. All right, so time for questions and answers. Let's check the chat. Jayla, I don't see any questions. Does anyone have any questions they want to throw in the chat or raise their hand? All right. And like I said, you could put in stuff in the chat or the Q&A throughout this the workshop. If you think of something, just put it in there and we'll get to it before we end. But now I'm going to turn it over to Kathy Moline, who's going to talk more in depth about the Commuter Assistance Program CAP Operating Assistance Grant Program. Take it away, Kathy.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am Kathy Moline. I'm Commuter Programs Manager for anything other than Northern Virginia. And I have been with DRPT for about 5.5 years. So we have 2 funding opportunities for the commuter assistant programs. They are CAP Operating Assistance, Commuter Assistance Program Operating Assistance, and CAP Project Assistance. I'm going to talk to you about the CAP Operating Assistance. Next slide. Since Transportation Demand Management, also known as TDM, covers a broad range of project and program strategies that are too numerous for us to fund, DRPT set a list here for projects that are both efficient and effective, such as increasing the use of transit, van pool, and carpool, increasing the number of ride match requests, reducing vehicle miles traveled, mitigating traffic congestion, reducing air pollution, and saving fuel. Next slide. So I'm going to talk to you and touch on guidelines and any updates for the CAP Operating Assistant grant applications. Next slide. This is a map of our current eligible applicants. However, if there is anyone on this workshop today that is seeking to establish a new commuter assistance program, please reach out to Chris Gabe or I before applying for any funding. Next slide. As you are planning your FY26 grant application, it is important to keep these objectives in mind. The primary objective is to achieve a year-to-year increase of the number of people using a DRPT-approved ride matching system, as well as your application needs to demonstrate that your program will achieve a measurable increase in the use of carpool, vanpool, and transit usage. Next slide. The CAP Operating Assistant Grant covers your day-to-day operations. Your application expenses should be necessary and justified for the operation of your program. They must be reasonable in nature and in the amount that you are requesting, and contribute to the increase of new ride matching requests. The Blue Book lists an eligible and ineligible expenses, but please keep in mind the list in the Blue Book is not all inclusive. So please reach out to Chris Gabe or I if you have any questions. Next slide. As Chris mentioned earlier in his presentation, these are some of the changes that we have for the CAP operating. A simplified project description. We've added a project scope. We need greater attention to project staff expenses, greater attention to grant administration expenses. We need justification of memberships and made changes to the application scoring criteria. Next slide. The program description has been simplified into 1 or 2 sentences. All we need to know for this is what your program is and what it does. The program scope, we need to know how the funds you are requesting will be used, what will be implemented, services provided, how will they be provided, how the public receives the services, what ride matching system do you use, how to learn, how the public learns about your program, and also what will be done to increase the number of ride match requests, as well as increase the use of carpool, vanpool, and transit. We also need you to include any other grant-funded components of your program. Next slide. This is a list of some of the eligible administration expenses. It is important to note that the cost of administrating the grant should be much less than the cost to implement activities that get people to request a ride match and use transit, carpool, or vanpool. Next slide. Over the years, we found a need for greater attention to the application for program staff expenses. Some of the eligible staff tasks would be direct assistance to the public, follow-up to the public, developing and placing marketing ads, as well as reporting the required performance data, program activities, and results to DRPT. Next slide. For the staff description, the FY26 application is going to ask, is the staff a full-time or part-time employee? How many hours of work, on average, will be performed by each employee listed on the application and working on your program? What is the overall percentage of time for each employee listed on the application? We use these details to develop your contract. Any tasks that are listed on your application that help develop your contract will not be allowed. Any tasks not listed, on your application that may help develop your contract will not be allowed to be charged to the grant. Next slide. As Chris mentioned earlier, this is new for the FY26 application. We get a lot of different membership asks with applications. So we'd like to confirm that any memberships you are including in your application are important for your program while meeting the program objective of increasing carpool, vanpool, and transit usage. Next slide. Tips for a good application. Details, details, details. We cannot stress this enough that this is needed. We need it for the project scope. We need it for the list of expenses and operating costs. We need it along with your milestones and events. If I oversee your grants and you send me an application, I can send you 2 questions with your application. That's a good application. I can send you 20. The more details, the more we're able to work through your application. Another thing that's important to remember is do not assume DRPT staff knows your program and what you do. Provide details for someone at DRPT who doesn't know anything about your program. Next slide. Remember, as I said, Chris and I are not the only ones who review your application. Upper management here at DRPT also reviews and meets with us to discuss each application, and our recommendations are discussed all the way up to the director. Next slide. As mentioned, your applications go through multiple reviews and evaluations. Is the grant a smart investment for the Commonwealth? Are the expected results realistic? And are the outcomes of the meeting the goal of the grant program? Because of this, DRPT can remove ineligible and unnecessary expenses during the application review and evaluation period. And we may also recommend lower funding amount than was requested. Next slide. As Chris mentioned, we have new scoring, and we also have a new total of points possible. The project description and scope are separate, and then we added ride match request trends. As I mentioned, for the project description, keep it short, 1 or 2 sentences of what your program is and does. For the project description, I just talked about that. For the project scope, your scope depends on description of how your funds will be used, what will be implemented, services provided, what activities will occur during the fiscal year, and what will be done to increase the number of RIDE Match inquiries. For marketing promotion, your score depends on how well your marketing and program activities are defined in your application. A big one that we had last year is the call to action. What do you want people to do who sees your messages? For milestone event descriptions, again, this must contain detailed milestones, detailed events, and other activities important to the operation of your program. List any action or event that will make significant change to the development of your program. For staff level and work tasks, your score will be based on if staff levels are appropriate or excessive, and if the work tasks are appropriate to implement your program. For budget details, a well-detailed description of all expenses is crucial to the evaluation and scoring of your application. Budget detail scores depend on proper use of expense categories and the listing of each and every expense. For cost effectiveness, this score reflects on an efficient program that achieves maximum results with minimum costs. The number of ride matching requests and the program costs to achieve these results will be considered. For the ride match request trends, this is based on the number of number of ride match requests received for the past 3 years. Significant increase in a ride match request will result in a higher score than a decline or no increase in ride match requests. Next slide. Performance measures are a requirement of all CAP grants. Depending on your program, you may be required other data than just the rideshare requests, such as employer outreach or Vanpool data. A complete list of performance measures is found in the Purple Book. Slide. And like I say, we cannot express enough about details. The more the merrier is what they always say, but also refer to your Blue Book. Chapter 3 of the Blue Book, page 74 is a commuter assistant program guidance, but there's guidance ahead of that chapter with other DRPT grants. So now I'm going to turn it over to Gabe Ortez.
Yeah, Kathy, before we got a question in the chat. So Andrea, so you put in your question, what are you looking for on cost effectiveness? Is this going to have some guidance? You put that in before Kathy got to that, so I'm not sure if hopefully she answered that question for you. But if not, just to reiterate, so cost effectiveness, the goal of the project is to get more people to seek out ride matching, seek out their options other than driving alone. And so that's a performance measure. We measure that. So cost effectiveness, I always use it as an example. If it takes $1 million in a project to get, 1,000 people to do that versus, $200,000 in another project to get the same 1,000, obviously the one with the lower cost ratio is the better project. And so that's what we're looking at. We're looking at the, is this really going to be an effective to get that result?
Well, hey, Chris, if I may,
Sure.
I just from the, there's so many ways to show that. And, it could be a lot of work or it could be, but if you just have some guidance of you want number of ride matching requests per year over budget requested for marketing, that's a straightforward measurement. But do you want us to write a paragraph? Do you want us to write a lot of details? Do you want us just to give you a number? That is just, to me, when I saw that, I saw a red flag for, it's new. And unless it's very structured and telling us what exactly you want, it seems so vague. So I'm just throwing that out there based on past experiences with just not really knowing what you want or how you want it.
Right. So
I
that's
would
not a
just,
question.
and I don't know if anybody else would like to pitch in because, you know, I'm not speaking for, hopefully I'm not speaking just for me. So,
So, okay, Andre, so that is actually not something that you're asked to put in the application. So
Right.
we don't ask you to enter some type of cost and effectiveness information or anything. We do that calculation. So every month you're putting in data into our system that shows, you know, the results of getting ride matches. We're looking at those numbers compared to the cost that you've spent. And then we're also looking at compared to what, you know, your new application is going to be. So we already have the data, and we just do it, and we have the, you know, we have the application data, and we also have the cost data. So it's nothing you need to do on your end, but we're putting that in to say we're looking at that to make sure that, you know, you're being cost effective and getting results. Okay, and I don't see any other questions. And I don't see any hands raised. So yeah, so I think, yes, we can turn it over to Gabe Ortiz to cover the CAP project assistance. Gabe? Right. Gabe is
Okay.
on, is he?
Yeah, I was mute. Did you guys hear me at
Okay.
all? I thought I had muted myself and then it said it muted me.
We can hear you now.
Okay. Oh, you couldn't hear me before? Should I start
No.
over?
Yes.
Gabe Ortiz. I work out of the Northern Virginia office. And I'm Kathy's counterpart up here. And I am going to go over the CAP project assistance grants. These are, for the most part, foundationally similar to CAP operating in terms of some of the things you need to kind of track and be mindful of. And then I'll eventually kind of talk in a little more detail about the kind of separate buckets we have underneath of this. So some of these slides you've kind of already seen with Kathy, and we'll go over, you know, pretty quickly. But of course, if you have any other questions or want to clarify some of the stuff that we've already gone over, for sure, let us know, put it in chat, or eventually when we stop for questions, go ahead and ask your question. So here's one of those slides. This is obviously something we looked at before, but this is kind of the main overview of what the grants do, or what the CAP Project Assistant Grant is all about. I think that the takeaway, and the one thing I'll stress, is the second bullet. Just make sure whatever you do, it's measurable. Whatever you do, you can look back and say, yes, we accomplished what we wanted, or we're able to track some numbers, track some data, and we were able to get what we needed from the grant and stuck with what we wanted. Eligible applicants, again, the only caveat here is you can see we kind of bolded, it says van pool providers. So van pool providers are eligible to apply for the CAP Project Assistance Grant. And obviously it'll be a grant if you're a van pool provider, and hopefully we do have some on this call. It would be the CAP Project Assistance Van Pool Grant, which I'll get into in a little more detail. So I think another big takeaway I want you to get from this is this sentence is really great, and I would say it should serve as kind of your guiding principle when you're doing your applications. I would say if you have your applications up here, I would have this statement right here and just kind of use this as a filter to kind of weed out any expenses that you think might not be pertinent to the grant and aren't going to help kind of make you achieve the goal for the grant. So I can't stress this enough. Just make sure all these expenses that you do have are in line with the grant and are going to help you achieve the goal of the grant. So really, this is kind of foundational for all your planning, and just really important to always keep this kind of statement in mind as you start to develop your grants for 26. Changes for fiscal 2026, what Kathy went over applies to project assistance grants as well. So I won't go into too much detail here. Just make sure that you are aware of this as you start putting pen to paper and start getting your grants ready. One thing I will add to here, and this is kind of my personal thing, but I think Kathy and Chris both agree, like we want to make sure that your milestones are very comprehensive and complete and cover everything that you're going to be doing in your program. So always make sure to keep that in mind. And I'll go over that in a little more detail for the next down the road here. So project description and project scope. I think one thing we can agree on is when we do our evaluation of the grants, the project descriptions do sometimes seem to be lacking. So at least in this case now, they're not going to be as as long as we typically expect. So just make sure you do add the necessary detail. And then of course the project scope is new. And one thing I'll say is what we want to see in the project scope is have it be very project focused. While we do like to know the background of your programs, no need here to put what the vision of your program is or anything related to the history of your agency, any awards that you've won. That's kind of what like your strategic plans are for. And I know you all are working on that. So many of you have already completed it. That's where we'll want to see that kind of stuff. But I would say, at least for the scope, keep it completely focused on what you want to spend the money on. So grant administration expenses. I'm not going to belabor this too much because I think Kathy went over this really well. But just a reminder that it should be a minor part of your budget. We don't want to minimize the work that's done here. Like you can't manage a grant without doing some of this stuff. So we realize it's important, but we just don't want it to be again, a focus of your grant. What we want to see is how you're going to get those results and how you're going to reach that goal. So make sure to again, keep an eye on this and simply just make sure that it's in line with the rest of the budget. Staff description. One reminder I'll throw out there is just make sure that your staff and all the grants, especially for those caps that have multiple grants, that there's no crossover with work you're doing. If you're working with an cap operating assistance grant, all the work that you do and needs to stick with that grant. We don't want to see your work or even any of the staff descriptions bleed over into any other projects, into any other grants. Sometimes we will see staff descriptions include other projects not related to any grant that we have. So make sure that whatever the staff is doing, it's completely related and completely focused to the grant. I'll also add, be specific as you can with your staff description, no generalities. One thing I'll say is, if you have somebody in the grant and staff description says manage programs, we'll want that spelled out. Like, obviously, we don't want to have a book written about it, but definitely some of the main things, somebody would be doing if they were to manage the program, or if that was one of their duties as a staff being paid out of these grants. Memberships, just make sure you let us know how, whatever membership you're going to apply for, how is that going to help you achieve the goal of the grant? Tell us why it's important for you to have the membership. That's kind of what we're looking for. Make a case to have it. I think that's the biggest thing. And make a case that it is a good use of the funds. And again, I'll say it till I'm blue in the face, but make sure you make a case that this membership will help us achieve the goal of the grant. I would, if you can, and we can certainly send this to you, but these are great questions to have as you apply for memberships or reapply for memberships. Make sure you can answer these questions. And if you can, then I think you'll have a good shot at having it approved. So we have a couple projects here underneath, I guess we'll almost call them sub grants to the main grant that we offer here at DRPT. They're the employer trip reduction, van pool, transit marketing projects, and other projects. Other projects is, for the most part, kind of open-ended. I don't want to throw this term around too loosely, but this is kind of where you can almost pilot some ideas and try things that are typically not what you do with your regular programming, or things that you regularly don't do in your employer outreach or in your cap operating assistance grant or whatever other grant you have. I would also say this is a great opportunity to kind of help push your program forward. These is where you want to put in ideas that could be specific to your region or specific to your jurisdiction, and really doesn't fit in these other buckets of employer trip reduction, van pool, or transit marketing. Also a good place to put grants where you're doing a combination of things. Sometimes you you might have an idea that combines transit marketing with employer trip reduction. This is probably where you would want, other projects is where you probably would want to put a grant like that. So first bucket here that we'll go to is employer trip reductions. Pretty simple, straightforward. Anything that's going to have an employer focus will be funded out of this grant. Here's some of the objectives. We really want to see that everything that you see here, and again, you can find this in the blue book, we will be doing is pretty much looking at these objectives and seeing if your grant are kind of meeting these needs here. We can't really accept any grants that aren't considering these three objectives, very closely and with a lot of detail. Really, it kind of boils down to also, adding employers adding transit benefits, and for us, while there's no one perfect way to do that, we do realize and kind of believe that direct outreach is part of achieving that. So we also want to make sure that grants have a real strong component when it comes to that. Again, points of emphasis, kind of how I mentioned, we think that these grants should be sales focused. We think that relationships need to be built. Once relationships are built, follow-up is part of a component of that. You're making sure that your quote unquote clients are getting what they need and don't need more resources or help. So, that's really only done through what we think is that direct outreach. Employers need to be sold a lot of the times to accept things like transit benefits and to implement things that they usually don't. So that's why we think that's an important component of it, at least the sales aspect. Like we said about ride matching, you can't really perform and get the results without doing that direct outreach. We are always open to listen to ideas, but kind of some of those tried and true ways to do that direct outreach, it could be the on-site outreach, doing events on-site at employer sites, picking up the phone. We realize, email is a big component of that. And so we want apps to be centered around that direct outreach. And that's something we'll be looking closely when we evaluate these employer outreach or employer trip reduction grants. Van pool projects. So here we'll discuss kind of this second bucket. And again, pretty much how the name describes, anything van pool related, we'll expect to be funded out of this grant. Here are the objectives for the van pool project. Really all we've centered around creating new vans, getting people into vans. That's really, again, similar to employer trip reduction. That's going to be the main focus for us when we evaluate these grants, making sure that these objectives are met. Of course, while not as popular as kind of the other grants that we give out, the van pool data collection and NTD reporting is also where you would be funded if that's the route you wanted to go, to provide vans with that exception. Here's some eligible and ineligible expenses. Couple things I just wanted to bring up for this year. DRPT is, we have standardized van save assistance. So we would expect that if you do anything related to van save, you'd use kind of that framework that we've built up. But I do want to, caveat to that is that, all other types of incentives for this are eligible. We'll consider them. That's why just key to make sure you talk to your program manager before you come up with any ideas. We also would be more than welcome to see any van pool project that's doing kind of a pay for performance type of incentive. And this is where an applicant would be incentivized to reward for achieving results. So an example of that is DRPT would agree to pay a monthly payment over a defined period for any new van pool started by the applicant. So, that's something we would consider. As I mentioned, if there are other ideas that you all have for van pool incentives or for creating van pools, for sure, let us know. We'll definitely consider it. But this is kind of where we set the table here. And then the ineligible, pretty self-explanatory. Really, anything capital related or anything related to the operation of van pool aren't eligible for this grant. And then I'll just end it again with this isn't an all-inclusive list. So make sure if you have ideas and you have other other ways you want to kind of meet some of the objectives of the goals that I didn't list here or that aren't really obvious in the blue book, for sure, let us know. All right, now I'm going to talk about the transit marketing grant. I think this is year 3 of this grant, if I'm not mistaken. Pretty straightforward. Anything that you plan to do or your project or your program plans to do related to transit marketing, we'd like put into this grant. The way we see it, this is an investment in marketing transit and with the main goal of increasing ridership. That's really it. So anything that goes into this grant, we want to make sure it's centered around that. On this, you see the eligible projects and expenses list. Again, also not a comprehensive list, but for sure, these are the things you would want to keep in mind as you start applying for this grant. But this while centered around transit in again, similar to what I was saying with grant pool, we would always be open to other ideas here. I don't want to make you feel like you are boxed into any of the stuff that you see here. So make sure you get in contact with us as soon as possible. If this is grant you want to pursue and you have some ideas. But yeah, this grant, hopefully we see more action here. Because I think transit definitely could use the boost. Still coming back from COVID, even though I just saw a report that WMATA is doing really well, Metro Bus, so I think that bodes well for the region. But yeah, if you have any other questions about this, for sure, let us know. Other projects, kind of talked about this earlier. So anything that can't be fit really in those other 3 sub kind of grant categories, this is where it would go. I will say just one general tip specific to this grant, and really this applies to all grants, but I think more so here. Whatever you apply for through this grant, the justification needs to be very clear, very strong. If you have a new idea for something, we want to know why you want to do this and where the need is. Really, that's just answer that question. This application, this project is needed because. And again, I think that really applies for other projects. And this is your opportunity, again, to expand your program, try something new. If there's some ideas that you think would be great, but just don't fit really under those 3 buckets, this is where you want to go to fund that. So a few tips on a good application. I would say keep in mind that the state, the Commonwealth is investing in whatever project you apply for. So always keep that in mind. Ask yourself with whatever expense, with whatever kind of idea, is this a good investment for the state, the Commonwealth, and then obviously is a good investment for your local jurisdiction because of that match. So just keep that in mind. Another thing is to know, at least from our perspective, is if we do want to fund results, we want to fund projects that are going to give us results. So make sure your application and everything that goes into that reflects that. I'm going to harp on this one last time. You won't hear me say it anymore. Make sure your milestones are very, very comprehensive. Use your budget as kind of a guide. Say, hey, what's in my budget that I can put in my milestones to some degree? The marketing section in the apps, what can I put in the milestones? We plan to use these to help us kind of track program success throughout the year and also be a really good tool for our regular meetings. What I kind of envision, at least from my end, is pulling up these milestones and just saying, hey, where are we at with this? And you guys giving us updates. So make sure that some time is put to making sure those milestones are very comprehensive and complete. So general application review and scoring. Kathy, I think it's really important to always remember that, how Kathy mentioned, it's really not just us making the call on these grants and reviewing them. Even finance starts to look at these. And so make sure that, you keep that in mind as you go through that when you do these applications, make them clear enough that anybody that's not so closely tied to them, like your program manager, can understand what's going on, can understand what you're trying to do and what you're spending the money on. I would say make sure that the budgets are comprehensive. Make sure that the budgets include all the expenses that make up that category. You don't want to leave anything out, and make sure it's clear that we know that, all right, this one particular category has these expenses in it, and that makes sense, and that we know where all the funding is going. I would say, with that last bullet, your goal is not to have us contact you. Your application should be so good and comprehensive that there's really no need to contact you. We do receive several applications a year where that's the case. We just go through it. It all makes sense, and we greenlight it without any questions. So that's your goal. Make sure we don't contact you to clear anything up or to ask some questions or to second guess anything that you have in there. And when we go through the evaluation of your grants, couple things just to avoid. I would say make sure there's no ambiguity. Make sure everything is clear. Make sure that everything is. Make sure that all your expenses. Make sure that all your activities are easily understood. I would say make sure in terms of the budget and the work being proposed, there's no disconnect there, and that all the work is appropriate for what you're asking for in terms of the final request for your project. Again, any other questions related to this? I mean, of course, prior to hand, we still have some time, so make sure you contact us and you let us know. We're always open to reviewing grants as well prior. If you have a simple write-up of what you want to do or even a draft, for sure, let us know, and we'll be more than happy to take a look before you finalize and submit. So as you see the scoring here, Kathy did a great job going through all of these, so I'm not gonna do that, but just take a look and see that everything here is kind of equal importance, but a couple of these things do stand out, and that's the project scope and budget detail. Budget detail, I think, is critical. Just one more tip with that is that when you're filling out your budget, make sure that all the expenses are included in the categories. So if you have advertising promotion as one of your categories, make sure you list everything that's going to be spent out of there. Make sure you include all those individual expenses that comprise each category. That's critical for us. And just really important for your application in terms of the scoring. As you can see, it's one of the higher amounts here. So performance measures, primarily with the projects. If you have Vanpool or employer outreach, we'll be expecting some data from you on a monthly basis. You can get the details on that in the purple book, but that's something to expect and always something to be kind of prepared to do when you apply for these grants. And when you get these grants, the performance measurements are key for us to kind of track how the grants are doing and eventually kind of see what kind of measures of success we're seeing with each grant. Now I'll go over some resources and guidance. So this is our list of bench contractors. So we would for sure encourage you all, when you do need to contract out work, that you take a look at this grant and that you work with these contractors. They've been vetted by DRPT. So if anyone has any marketing needs, if there's research or planning that needs to get done, or even just help implementing some of your TDM strategies, this is a good place to go to find contractors that, again, have already been vetted by DRPT and that you all can use, take advantage of the rider clause to work with these. It's really, really simple process for accessing these contractors. First, you would just let your program manager know, and then your program would contact whatever contractors you need to work with. I think it's a minimum of 3. Chris, correct me if I'm wrong there. I think we do have to at least contact 3 of the contractors. Essentially send them a scope of work of what you need, and then make that determination on who you want to work with. And again, just let us know if you are interested in going this route. We can go over the process with you.
You don't need to do 3.
Okay.
You could do 1.
Yeah, I don't know. I got that from my other procurement days from somewhere else, I think. All right, thank you, Chris. So resource and guidance. Make sure you always check your blue book. You make sure you always check your purple book. I love this kind of device for remembering which is which. Blue book starts with a B, so you can think before. Blue book is what you look at before you apply for your grant. That's what you're going to need to know in terms of what filling out the application entails and all that good stuff. Purple book, post, starts with the P. That's what you will need and should be, kept right by your side and as you start and kick off the fiscal year. and as you go throughout the year, managing your grant. So make sure you keep those things in mind. Another little tip I'll say is, of course, we are always here. Your program managers at the RPT are here to always work with you and to answer questions. But I would say before you pick up the phone, before you send that email, see if you cannot find your answer in either one of these documents. Primarily it'd probably be that purple book as you go throughout the year, but they're very comprehensive and they have a lot of information you need. So make sure you do that. And then I would say after that, if you have questions about expenses, or if you have a question about something you're planning on doing, always keep that scope of work and budget detail that you receive in your agreement close by too. Check that. And then, if you're still having issues getting the answer you need, for sure, let us know. Pick up the phone or send us an email. But I'll encourage you guys to always, use those resources first. Of course, always contact us when you need to. Then if you got to contact us, especially for the folks that hopefully we have a few here that are going to be new to DRPT, here's our contact information. Again, I work primarily with Northern Virginia. Kathy Moline works with the rest of the state.
All right, thank you, Gabe. I like the way you do your memory game of the blue book and the purple book. B is for before the grant and P is post grant. So
yeah, I wish I could take credit for that. I don't know where I heard that. It was a while ago, but yeah, it always helps to keep those in order.
that's great. All right, so it looks like we have a few questions in the chat. So I will take a shot at answering them. So first one is from Andrea. So she wants to clarify: is CAP project assistance different from technical assistance? Yes, it is. Very different. They're two different applications. However, those two things can actually be related. So I'll explain. So for technical assistance, that is, you're going to do a study, a plan, research, a big survey. That's what technical assistance is about. So you want to use that. But then you could use the results from that, the data collected from all those things, from your technical assistance project, to use to form a project that you could apply for CAP project assistance. And that would be something that's going to change behavior and get people to use, transit more, carpool more, van pool more, even bike commuting more. So that's how they're related, but they are separate applications and separate programs with separate scoring. All right. And then Wendy, I could see you're thinking. I like that. So Wendy had a couple things here that I'll try to address them. So the first one was about giving out smart trip cards or smart cards with some preloaded amount, provided some assistance for people with limited income. So for commuter assistance program, things that we like term and fare buy downs or discount fares are not going to be something we fund through the CAP program. That probably is more of a transit operating thing where it goes into fares and things like that. So if it's just kind of lowering the cost for people, probably not something that would be eligible in the CAP grant program, but could be eligible as part of the transit operating or type of program, and maybe even a trip program. I don't want to put that. Please read TRIP in the blue book. I know TRIP does zero fare type of thing. I don't know if you can do things that are, sort of buy downs for low income people. So hopefully that answered that question. And then your other part was doing an e-bike voucher program, again, for low income people. Again, if it's just subsidizing things, to reduce the cost, kind of not what we're really looking for. Something that's actually behavior change, right? They're driving alone or something, and we want them to do transit. We want them to get on transit or bike commute to work. That's more of the project that we want to see. Now, it could come with some, short-term incentives for, hey, try the bus. If you're driving, try the bus. We'll give you, 10 free rides or something like that, and then monitor them to see if they continue doing it. Same thing for the bike. So it could be in conjunction, but again, I think the purpose of the CAP project is to actually behavior change people who are driving to get them to use, some transit carpool examples and bike commuting. So hopefully that explained that. And then Josh had a couple questions. So how do we work into the applications coming initiatives that are still being defined or developed post grant submission? And you use Go My Way VA as an example. So for your application, I think you focus on what you know. Focus on what you know now for your application. I mean, we all, none of us have a crystal ball we could see into the future. If something changes and says, something happens where it's like, well, we need to change our program in some way. We can work with you, and maybe that warrants a scope change, and we can change later on. But I think for the application itself, in order to get scored properly, you've got to focus on what you know you're going to do. And again, we're flexible. We know sometimes things change. Heck, we had a pandemic that changed a lot of things. We had a change in our grants. So we can do that with a scope change if that's necessary. So, but stick to what you know, and don't try to look into the future and try to figure out what might happen later on. All right, and then Marcus, let's see, avoiding bleed over with CAP projects, but each incorporating transit. Is there further guidance on expected separation aside from the audience? So I think what you're asking is, so some people, they have a commuter assistance program, so they apply for CAP operating assistance for that. But then there's also, a project that they have that they want to, that's either above and beyond what they're doing for the operating, like employer trip reduction or something like that. And I think your question is like, how do you separate those two? And it's really on the amount of effort. So if you're just doing, general van pool marketing, throw some things out there, then you're probably doing that through your CAP operating, and that's not necessarily a van pool. But if you were to do an employer outreach program that's very significant, where you're having staff time devoted to doing that and resources devoted to doing that, and you've got a big effort going on there, then yeah, you should separate that. Same thing for other modes. If you want to do a huge carpool program or a big carpool push, even though in operating you promote all of these things, if you're doing something really major, really a major effort and emphasis, then you probably want to look at a separate grant through the project assistance for that. And we've had some things for bikes, and that's why we separated transit marketing, because there were some special initiatives that were really heavily focused on transit marketing and solely that, and also helps you and us, measure the effectiveness when you kind of separate those things out. So again, it can be difficult, right? So, you're doing your operating, you're doing a lot of things with that. So when do I know how to say, well, we're doing this so much, I should get a separate grant for that, so I can really do that in a major way. That's really, it's all about effort and the amount of expenses and time and staff levels and things that you're putting into it. And we can guide you on that. There's no written rule. But I'm glad you're thinking about that. And we've certainly seen grants where they combine 2 or 3 projects, and we're going, really, these should have been separated out, because it really makes it hard to kind of to score the application, but also to figure out what results you're going to get when you've got all these things in there that maybe should be separated. So, but Gabe and me and Kathy can help sort that out before you submit applications. So hopefully that addressed everyone's questions. I don't see any more questions coming in chat. I don't see any hands raised. So hopefully, let's see, I think we got another chat. So Josh had a question about, CAP project that might continue on and be part of your CAP operating, your general commuter assistance program operations. I think, Gabe was alluding to that. If you want to try something with a CAP project grant, and then you get good outcomes, obviously, then maybe that becomes part of your regular services as part of your community assistance program. And that's kind of also related to the CAP strategic plans that we were asking everyone to do. So you can have in that CAP strategic plan some things that maybe you're not doing now, but the data showing, hey, maybe this should be done. Doing those things in a CAP project assistance grant rather than just automatically putting that into a CAP operating grant might be a better way to go. So that way you can monitor things, you can track things separately, you could see really how that new project performs before you want to just take it and make it part of your whole your whole offerings in your commuter assistance program. So that's a good way to think about it. All right, I'll give it a few more seconds. These are all great questions. I'm glad you're thinking. And again, I think some of these definitely need some more follow-up discussions with it as you think through some of your details. You'll probably have some more questions, and we love to talk to you about these things before you click on an application, because that's the best way. We can guide you. Obviously, we can't say, yeah, if you just write this in there, we're going to give you the money. We can't do that, but at least we can guide you into something that's going to be a good application, at least something that won't surprise us, and something that we can certainly say, hey, this really fits something that we're trying to do. All right, Jayla, I don't see any more questions or hands raised. So yeah, if you have questions in later on, you've got our emails. Reach out to us. We'd be happy to do that. You've got the blue book to review. But thank you all for taking the time out to join us today. Hope you've got some good information out of this that's going to help you submit a really great application. And that concludes our workshop. Thank you all.